There's a very specific kind of joke that's not really trying to be funny. It's testing the room. You say the ugly thing, wrap it in irony, wait to see who laughs, and if anyone objects, suddenly they're the problem. Too sensitive, too censorious, unable to take a joke. That's how taboo ideas get cleaned up for public use. Not all at once, not with a speech, usually with a meme, a group chat, and a bunch of people pretending they don't know exactly what's happening. So this one is about jokes, Nazis, laundering bad ideas, and why some laundering really does need to be done in public. This is Shrink the Nation. Let's go.
This is Shrink the Nation, a podcast for thoughtful, informed adults, preferably holding a drink and definitely holding a thought. The views expressed here are ours alone. They do not represent our employers, institutions, licensing boards, government agencies, bourbon distilleries, or most emphatically, our families. They've been very clear about that. This show is for education and entertainment only. Nothing you hear is medical, psychiatric, legal, or professional advice. We're clinicians, not your clinicians. If something we say stirs you up, that's not a crisis, that's a journal entry, or an email sent politely. We're here to challenge ideas, not diagnose strangers on the internet. And if you are in real distress, please reach out to a professional who can actually help you. All right, hey, as always, I'm David. If you've listened to us before, you know who I am, you know what to do. Today, I am enjoying Robbie, this Montana 1889, and it was crafted in the great city of Bozeman, Montana, as Sheldon Cooper would call it, by the Bozites. You know, the first sip of this was, I'm not going to lie, was kind of rough. And I am drinking it on the rocks. I think as the ice kind of melts, the flavor profile is becoming a little bit more palatable. And I'm starting to enjoy it, actually, as
Yeah,
one does all bourbon. I think it confirms what you've said before, which is bourbon is bourbon. It all
yeah.
pretty much tastes the same now.
Well,
It's getting better.
the first sip's always like gasoline. So, it triggers every nerve ending in your tongue to fire at once, and it takes a little bit. And then, of course, that ice melting's helping to mitigate some of the hate. It makes a difference.
Which is what I think we need to be doing tonight. I think
Yeah,
that's kind
it's
of the role.
mitigate.
We're going to play the role of ice, melted ice in
Yeah.
this
Uh,
cesspool of the bourbon that is what our culture is becoming. Foreshadowing.
right. It's Rob, a psychiatrist, board certified, and have some military experience. And I'm here this evening in honor of the director of the FBI drinking Woodford Reserve. Um, I'm hesitant to say his actual name because he seems to hold grudges and has the power of the FBI, but apparently he's got a touch of a drinking problem. Or maybe it's just a responsibility problem, not necessarily the drinking part. And he seems to have a particularly love of giving special bottles of Woodford Reserve in which he signs the bottles and gives them
No,
away, which
he actually gets his name, the FBI seal, and
yeah,
director etched into the bottles as
yeah,
well. So he gets him apparently. This is now the bottles are floating around all over the place.
right.
So I don't,
You know,
but
and alcohol is one of those adult gifts that you can give. You don't really have to think about it. So, someone's retiring, and give them a bottle of bourbon, or you're going to a party, you can bring a bottle of wine. You don't have to ponder it. I have found that those who give the most booze are the ones who really, really like it. Correlations, not causation. I'm just drawing some correlations here.
I will say that this bottle that I have as a gift, because I've never been to Bozeman,
I have. It's a lovely city.
imagine it is.
Yeah, it
It's a
is.
beautiful state.
Yep.
Ever since we started doing the show, people don't know what to get me anyway for gifts, so they always end up getting me bourbon.
Yeah.
And I've got an envious bourbon selection now, in my cabinet. There's got to be 20 bottles up there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, half, some drunk and some not, but lots of options. But I think the big deal though about the director of the FBI giving out bottles of booze is that since J. Edgar Hoover, I don't think the FBI director has given out gifts like that. And I believe Hoover would give out fingerprinting cards with his name on it. But this is taking that to a whole new level. It's well known that this particular gentleman, he likes to self promote and he loves merch. He loves the merch, man. The swag is what he's all about. And
He
especially name
does.
branded stuff. So he puts his name on everything. It's an interesting gift to be given by the director of the FBI, considering that it's strictly forbidden to have any alcohol in your system on the job. So it's just one of those things.
Well, it's one of those jobs that there's no such thing as downtime. There's no off time. You may not be necessarily on the job, but what's the bar he frequents in Vegas? Poodle Room.
I mean, that sounds like a place that any good, well-respecting FBI director would spend time at, the Poodle Room.
Yeah, so the Atlantic is the one that alleged this, and he's in his teleconference response, he was, objectively aggressive about it. But at any rate, the Atlantic, and he's now suing them for, I don't know, $1 billion.
$250 million. 250 million.
250. All right,
The Atlantic
250
and the writer,
million.
yeah.
It's all magic money. They allege in this article that he has been observed drinking very heavily at a place called Ned's in Washington, D.C., and then also the Poodle Room in Las Vegas. It doesn't feel like the Poodle Room would be a place that we'd expect to find any of the prior directors of the FBI.
I think probably the most appropriate place for the director of the FBI to be drinking would be in his garage whilst doing a podcast with his buddy.
Probably. That
Yeah,
that would
maybe
that
not in public.
Right. We could at least identify and, get behind that, but,
I could.
anyway, so
If he wants to come on, we'll gladly talk with him.
oh, that'd be awesome. I do have a suggestion, though. I say you and I meet at the Poodle Room and do podcast from the Poodle Room,
I don't know if I
drink
can handle the Poodle Room. I don't know what it is, to be honest,
Woodford
but I'm not
Reserve.
sure.
And speaking of Woodford Reserve, it's one of those. I'm not going to call it a high end bourbon. Of course, they have their special ones that are higher end. I find it to be a really vanilla bourbon. Its flavor profile is it's relatively clean. For those who drink bourbon, one of the cool things about bourbon is that it's got kind of a dirty flavor profile. In other words, it's lots of different flavors that are mixed in. Whereas with Woodford, it's a remarkably clean flavor profile, almost approaching, at least in my mind, Scotch. Scotch having a very clean flavor profile, except for the smokiness. At any rate, I don't like it. Give me pretty much anything else to include Old Crow.
Really? I mean, I've had enough Woodford Reserve. Just I think they give you those little bottles on planes.
I think that's called buying them.
Okay, well, buying, yeah, the little bottles. It's true. So I used to fly quite a bit, and I get 3 or 4 of these things because with an upgraded seat or whatever, they give you several of them. I used to just have them in my backpack. I didn't real. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've probably gone through security with a couple of bottles of that. They never stopped me. So
Yeah. We had the blessing of the FBI director.
yeah, nice to have on hand.
So that's what I'm drinking this evening. Running on too few hours of sleep as well. So if I get sloppy, I apologize in advance.
You look like you're running off fumes. Luckily for you, I think our topic is going to
It's
be
just my face. It's just my face.
well. This is why we don't have video because, good God, you got a face for radio, my friend.
I do. I do. That's the truth.
Just you're a beautiful man.
I've been told it's very punchable.
I do want you though to strap on your boots today, Robbie, because we're going to stomp some Nazis. That's my segue. There's been a couple of times now. The reason I bring this up at all is because it's happened more than once. And really, since going back to 2016, it's really been escalating. But there was another group chat of young Republicans out of the Florida State University. If I'm not mistaken, I apologize if it's one of the Florida universities where their group chat came to light and they were Hitler sympathetic, and it came out. And as has kind of happened in the past, a lot of that's been just sort of brushed off as, oh, they were just jokes. And it occurred to me that there's a pattern that we're sort of seeing whenever that occurs, where it's just a joke. They're just saying stuff. And then as people become offended by the joke and say, well, that shouldn't really be said, like you should be saying that, then it gets flipped into this complaint that the people who are objecting are now trying to censor the people who are making these statements. It turns the argument. It takes the person who's saying, I don't think it's right to talk about Nazi shit, especially if you're going to be trying to be in a leadership role, to why are you trying to censor people? And now that person is being attacked as trying to censor. So what's happening there?
Well, let's first start with just conceptually why a thing becomes taboo. to a society. So societies tend to create taboos in order to not eliminate the concept. You can't eliminate a concept once it's entered into the universe, but it is basically to hide that concept from their own self-image. From a Jungian stance, we've talked about the shadow, but it's forcing a concept into that shadow and hiding it from ourselves so thoroughly. So it becomes verboten to even speak of it. There's a reason for that. I mean, there are some things that really shouldn't be joked about. There's some things that shouldn't be considered and some things that shouldn't be done. I'm going to go out on a limb and probably say, Nazism. I think that firmly deserves to be made taboo. The interesting thing is, though, and this is chumming the waters is really what it reminds me of. So, this is the equivalent of there's always that guy, and it's almost always a guy. Although I have seen this on the other side, but there's always that guy that tries to turn everything into sexual innuendo. And, ultimately what they're doing is taking something that is taboo. They're trying to wrap humor around it, throw it out into the universe, out into the group context, and see if it's accepted or not, and then go from there. It's bad form regardless, but in this case, throwing that terminology out there ends up being a way that they can bring up those topics: Hitler, Nazism, racism. And if it's accepted, then they've made their point. And if it is denied, or if it is fought against, they can either deny it or they can flip it around, as you just said, and said, "Look, we're adults having an adult conversation. Don't censor."
Yeah. Well, starting off by and really, I think wrapping it in a joke kind of gives you that protection of, well, if you don't like it, it's just a joke. But if everybody laughs, then you know that there's some level of acceptance to it. And in these group chats, what you're kind of seeing with them is it starts out like that, and then it starts to become this almost one-upsmanship where people are now contributing pretty freely to the point that it becomes loyalty tests. If you're with us, you're going to say these things as well, to the point that it just becomes very much accepted. The response has been, once this stuff comes to light, has been, well, they're just young people telling jokes. To be a member of the Young Republicans, you just have to be under 40. So it's not that all these people are, these aren't 12-year-olds telling these jokes. You just don't know. These are adults. These are grown adults who know very much what they're saying. But you're right. It is chumming the water. It's testing, hey, is this a protected space? Is everyone else going to agree with it or not? And then still leaving that sort of plausible deniability of, hey, it was just a joke. Why are you guys are pearl clutching at this point? Why are you getting upset about just some kids, some knuckleheads making jokes, to the point that, again, yeah, you can argue that now there's censorship going on.
Well, this is reminding me of something. It's funny how terminology just sort of enters into the lexicon in a surprising way, at least to me. So lately, it seems like I cannot watch anything, any kind of news related show, without somebody making mention of the Overton window. Yeah, it just keeps popping up. And once you hear it, I promise you, tomorrow you'll hear it again. You'll hear it on some news channel. You'll hear some pundit talking about the Overton window. You'll hear it on a podcast. But the Overton window apparently is not a new concept, even though it was not a concept that I knew. It's a concept in political science that describes the range of policies or ideas that are considered acceptable in public discourse. And at least in political science, the theory is that over time, this window shifts from things that are just unacceptable to even ponder. But if they are brought into public discourse enough, they will be rejected and rejected and rejected. But that window is subtly shifting. And before you know it, it's well within the window of something we can talk about. And that's kind of what I'm seeing in this, is that my sense, my guess is that for a majority of these individuals that get sucked into these conversations, it is peer pressure, it is groupthink. Do they truly espouse Nazi beliefs? I don't think so. But one or two of them do. Some of them do. And once you dump out, even in jest, and you say Hitler enough times, you end up desensitizing the group. The Overton window for the group shifts. And now all of a sudden it is acceptable to say Hitler, talk about Hitler, and then before you know it, say, you know, He did have some good policies, which is ridiculous at its face, but that seems to be what's happening. And group dynamics would predict this, that groups tend to search for cohesion. And if someone is throwing these terms, shifting what's considered appropriate, and then you used a great term, the taboo laundering, which is basically taking a taboo concept, throwing it in there, and by simply putting it in, wrapping it in humor, making it a joke, whatever, it ends up cleaning it up to the point where next thing you know, it's no longer taboo. We're talking about it.
Yeah. Where I'm at with this now is okay, so we understand what's happening. We can see the process and we're seeing it happen multiple times. It's happening over and over, but it's happening on a much grander scale than what we're typically used to seeing. And so the big question I have is why? Why are we seeing that now? Why weren't we seeing that as much? Because these topics, these aren't new. This isn't the first group of people to be talking about Hitler. What's different about it is that these are people who are aspiring to be the next leaders within the GOP. That's what's different. And this is a much more mainstream adjacent group than what we would typically see. And then when you get JD Vance coming in and then making those excuse arguments of, well, they're just kids, they're just joking. That's very, very different than a bunch of neo Nazis sitting in a bar in the middle of nowhere with their little militia, right? This is totally different. So why are we seeing this now?
At this moment in time,
I mean, it's been happening more and more since 2016, but it's starting to escalate to the point where again, these young aspiring leaders, I mean, when you're in your late 30s, you're not too far off from being the next JD Vance. This is the group who's doing it now. It's not a bunch of bikers and skinheads. This is something totally different, Robbie. And why is it happening now?
gosh, Dave, I'm going to go out on a limb and say a
Another one,
couple.
a new limb. You're getting off the I'm not okay with Nazism limb and you're crawling out to a different one. Okay, we got it. New
Right,
limb. New limb, people.
right.
I wonder if this one will be as strong as the other one.
Well, I realize I really braving new ground here, saying, hey, in the argument of for or against, I'm against. I'm just,
Everybody, I'm going to go out and I'm just going to let y'all know, as brave as I am, that I am not for Nazis or rape.
I'm not.
I'm
Or
against
rape.
both. I'm
I'm,
against both, guys. I am
yep.
not a fan. I do not like it. I disagree. Vote down. Yeah. Thumbs down.
Judge me as you
Mhm.
will. I'm just, I'm taking a personal courage right
Yeah.
here, moral stance.
People will remember this day forever. In the annals of history,
Someone needed to take a stand.
somebody needed to stand up against Nazism and rape. But here I
Hmm.
am. Here I am.
Yeah, thanks to the courage given to me by Woodford Reserve, I'm making a stand today.
This Montana
So,
1889 has really
right,
braved me up.
right, really, really got our ethics fired up. Yeah, I mean, on its face, it's so ridiculous. But so why? Why did this shift? Well, there's easy answers, and then there's I think more complex answers, and I think the easy answer would be to lay it at the foot of the GOP leadership. That all of a sudden, probably since Obama, there were some what have been termed as dog whistles, some terminology that came into popular use that was easily deniable. It didn't necessarily scream racist, but it sent subliminal messaging, actually not subliminal, clearly conscious messaging that was
Yeah.
deniable.
Well, that son of a bitch did wear a tan suit.
Well,
How
yeah,
dare how
so unprofessional. Just not living up to the standards of a president of the United
non-presidential.
States. Yeah, very
Non-presidential.
non-presidential. He also wore mom jeans that were very unsettling for many. But
He's also a
so
smoker.
and he's a smoker or was. I don't think he is anymore.
Well, he smoked at some point, yeah.
Yeah, he smoked early on in his White House career, I believe. Had to hide it. So anyway, one could lay it at their feet. And again, they shifted the Overton window. And as it shifts, what becomes acceptable changes. I think there's something deeper though. I think there's a bigger thing going on. And I think it has to do with social cycles. And I've mentioned this book so many times, The Storm Before the Calm, mentioned it so many times, but but it talks about 50-year economic cycles that the United States has gone through from the beginning, and it talks about 80-year social cycles. And it just so happens that 2020 is the first time that the 80-year social cycle and the 50-year economic cycle has coincided. And historically, we always in these periods find ourselves being very challenged. The economic cycles usually are associated with some big development, some change, some fluctuation from the how we used to do it to how we're going to have to do it moving forward. And it creates uncertainty. It creates a little chaos. It creates some economic uncertainty. It changes the job markets. The social cycle, on the other hand, is a little different, and that's just when enough generations have passed that each generation changing the norms end up changing them so significantly that it creates a little bit of social chaos. And I think that actually is part of this. This 80-year cycle, if you do the math, go backwards in time, it takes us back to right around World War II. And the bar was set then. I mean, they are the first ones that said, you know what? I'm not supporting Nazis. I'm not doing it. I don't know if they were brave enough to come out against rape like we are. I mean, the personal
Not
courage
everyone
we're
is.
showing.
Not everyone is, Robbie.
I know. If only everyone was such brave warriors for right as we are. I don't remember any great statements against rape by the great leaders of World War II, but I do recall very clearly that they were not for Nazism, and in fact, I think we had a little kerfluffle, some shenanigans that was all dedicated to stamping out said
Well, Tiff,
Nazi. It was a little tiff, very similar to what's happening in the Gulf right now. Just a tiff. It was just a tiff. At any rate, so it is not terribly surprising to me that a social cycle that really started with that, and then what flowed from that, what flowed from the, hey, we're against Nazis, ended up actually being things like equal rights, establishing protections for minorities, bringing them into the fold, giving them the ability to freaking vote, despite the fact that they had the legal right to. All these things. And that flowed actually from the actions of the Nazis. And what we're now seeing is that cycle come into fruition. And here we are, everything old is new again, toying with fascism, toying with conceptually Nazism as a solution. And yet here's the last piece that I'm going to argue probably has something to do with that, is that the Caucasians, U.S. white males in particular, but whites. If you look at the arc of our population and the population breakdowns, our majority status is not indefinite anymore. So we're threatened on a couple of levels. So I think that brings back some idea of white supremacy a la Nazism, and that's probably why we're seeing it. Unless you have some other ideas,
well, the Jankos are back too, and mom jeans, and so things do come back.
they do.
I don't think those are the same, but no, I mean I agree with you. I think to some extent, like there is economics and the difference between the rich and the poor, and those separations does play heavily into racism. The more disparate a population gets, the more racism starts to find its way into it. I don't believe that viewpoint disappeared completely after World War II. The push for Nazi principles has been there, and I believe it's existed this entire time. I think the difference that we're seeing now isn't so much that it just started happening again. And I don't know that you're saying that. I'm just bringing that out, that it's been there. The difference maybe would be more of the Overton window being shifted to this point where people feel more comfortable saying it. And I do recall early in Donald Trump's first term, him being asked specifically to denounce these groups. And he had a lot of support from that side. I don't want to sit here because I can't. I can't sit here and say, oh, well, Donald Trump, it's because he's racist, he's a white supremacist or anything like that. I don't know that that's true, or at least I don't know that it's true enough to say, yes, Donald Trump is, because I don't know. What I do know Donald Trump is pro Donald Trump. He is that. Like, I know he is very Donald Trump supremacist.
as he has always been. And I think anybody that throws their support behind him is aces, just aces in his eyes, at least publicly. Like he's not gonna say things to upset people that support him. He is totally fine with saying bad things about people that don't. And any defense of his would be, well, they weren't going to vote for him anyway, right? Like, so who is he going to court? People who might vote for him or people who definitely aren't going to vote for him. And so, him being so egocentric as he is, when white supremacists were coming out in droves to support him because the things he was saying were Nazi adjacent, let's say. Some of the playbook that is happening now, anti-immigration, all this, it's the same thing. I think a lot of the speeches that he's given have been, I mean, they might as well have been given by the Fuhrer himself, just with different keywords in there to just sort of change who was being attacked. The primary difference between him and that at that point was there was a movement that the race was superior. I think he's just really views himself as superior and he'll say anything that's going to keep him in power. He's going to say anything that's going to get people excited. And these are tried and true statements. This is the algorithm that you follow if you want to get a population to follow you. And it's been working really well. I would struggle to say that he probably believes 90% of the shit that comes out of his own mouth. I think he just says it. If it works, he'll just stick it. It's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Whatever sticks, sticks. And if it doesn't, he moves on. So what we're seeing isn't so much that the leadership believes it as much as the leadership just doesn't care if that's happening because as long as they have support, as long as they have the numbers to keep getting elected, who gives a shit what the people below you are saying? I'm in charge. What worries me about it, Robbie, isn't that. What worries me is that it's the people who are trying to get in charge that are espousing these things. And that's the issue. Again, I don't see the big problem right now isn't the people in charge necessarily. It's that they're allowing these groups' voices to
Yeah.
be heard and that window to shift to where it's becoming
Well,
more and more appropriate. And they're making excuses for it.
and there's another factor that is likely. What was it, 2014, when all of a sudden the world changed and everyone had a supercomputer in their pocket, and social media changed the world, et cetera. So I think there's also a mechanism now that didn't exist before. So if you were wanting to socialize an idea like this in the past, you would have had to say it in a room with people that probably knew your mother. So, you had to own it. You can imagine walking into I don't know, PTA meeting and being like, how about that Hitler? Huh? And you got to own it. You don't necessarily have the ability to socialize it quite like you have now. And what they can do now is they can do the exposure and they can say, look at this outrageous thing. And then they can rely or call it irony, relax. It's just a joke, man. But by doing so, they gain some repetition. So everyone's doing this, everyone's saying it. And then other people will identify the outrage and will do it just to re stimulate the outrage. And then it becomes an identity thing. People like us aren't afraid to say these things. And then all of a sudden, the moral reversal happens. And that's the fascinating piece is when all of a sudden it's not, gee, we're wrong for talking about Hitler or saying Hitler was cool. It's actually the opposite. We're being oppressed, we're being censored. And before you know it, you've gone through this loop and you've achieved normalization of the concept. And you've probably scared some people into not standing up, not saying anything because they don't want to oppress anyone. And the window now has effectively shifted. You can't do that in real life. If I hold a rally and talk about Hitler, you know how that's going to go. Not well. And, for our
Well,
tens,
no, 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 not now. It's gonna go
right.
probably okay. Like, let's be
Well,
honest now.
it might be
Now
able to pull it off.
it's gonna be a bit yeah, you could probably pull it off. Now, I don't think you should.
Right. Well, and I'm not. For our tens of listeners, there is no planned rallies in that regard. But in real life, holding such a rally, there is no way to really roll through that sequence of laundering a taboo but there is on the internet. The internet, you can soften it with emojis. You can soften it with a funny little meme. You can, debate it ad nauseum. You can flip it around and say that you're being oppressed over it. In the real world, that is not going to work out. That's not gonna fly quite like that. So I say the internet is the medium by which this is, what's driving it, lots of things. What's allowing it, the internet.
Well, and I think your point about the internet, I think, is correct to some extent. Part of I would make the argument that the internet allows people to find other people who share these beliefs much easier than you would be able to do it if you had to actually leave your mom's basement. That's probably the most powerful piece from the internet isn't necessarily just the ability to launder it, it's the ability to find so many people that are going to agree with you who are also sitting in their mom's basements. I want to stress that like as hard as I possibly can that if you are pro Nazi, in my mind, you are probably just sitting in the basement of your parents' house, accomplishing nothing with your life because you need a life. But that's probably the thing. Now, I will challenge that it has become easier to do that live. The more extreme viewpoints do require the internet to be able to like soften it and launder it. But now that we're living in this administration, that is going to be pretty cool with damn near anything as long as it's pro that administration. As long as it's not counter to them, I think they're going to be fine with it. That is different, but it is fueled by the ability to get information out so quickly into such a mass group like the internet.
Agreed. What do we do
So,
about it?
well, I think what we need to do is start this anti-rape movement. We should have this anti-Nazi, anti-rape movement that desperately needs a couple of brave faces like ours to lead it,
You know what I
just
like
a
about
counter
that?
movement.
It's the irony of the obviousness, right? Well, we're capitalizing on that for, chuckles. The irony there is yeah, duh. And from our standpoint, yours and I, that Nazism in all its forms is as obvious as rape.
Yeah.
It's obvious. There's not even a point to debate here.
No, not at all. I think that's the thing. Isn't just that irony of saying I am anti-Nazi and anti-rape. I think what it does is it says something because I think if I were to come out and say that and start an actual movement of being anti-Nazi and anti-rape, I'm tying those two things together in such a way that the Nazis would have to be like, whoa, 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 we're not for rape. We're just for the Nazi part. I think that's the important piece is to tie them together in such a way that they can't be separated easily. You're pro-Nazi, great, you're pro-rape too.
There's a certain mad genius quality to that, actually.
This is why I sit around in my garage drinking, Robbie.
Yeah. If you don't numb that brain of yours, shenanigans will ensue. The world it gets dangerous if you don't saturate some of those GABA receptors to really
I
just
need to.
just go easy, man. Go easy.
Yeah.
I don't think in the history of mankind anyone ever thought of tying rape and Nazism together until this might be a first.
Tying them together.
Well, I always say is no such thing as new ideas. There are old ideas that are reinvented. I think you actually have developed a new idea. I mean, like a legit, like nobody ever thought of this before. This is new because it's so ridiculous. It's unprecedented.
It'll work too. I will say though, you kind of have to thank Donald Trump because in my entire life, I don't think I've ever known a Nazi, but man, he is allowing them to out themselves like nobody's business. And you got to appreciate that. Just like you said, he might be the person that actually saves democracy by exposing its weaknesses. Man, he's doing the same thing with Nazis. He's getting them to crawl out of the woodwork and identify themselves. And these were such taboo topics that who the fuck was going to talk about it in a public space? Well, they are now because it's safe to. I'm just saying, let's not let Nazism be a safe thing and let's tie it to rape. Let's go full blown. I am anti Nazi and I'm anti rape. And if you were a Nazi, you are pro rape.
Yep. Let's make the website, baby. Let's do it.
I'm updating it as we speak.
Yep.
See, you thought I was brave, but what I am is sick and a genius.
Yeah, you're a mad genius, no doubt. So, other than your perpetual fuckery, other than that as a plan, honestly, what really, from the bigger picture societal standpoint, what would you propose that what's the antidote here?
My great grandpa had a pretty good antidote for Nazism.
Yeah, 30-06.
I guess I'm not kidding in some ways. Like I think the response to Nazism is to stomp it out, is to be really clear. It's just not appropriate. It's not okay. That level of hatred should be reserved for one group, and that is Nazis. That's about it. I think being sympathetic to a cause that was solely about destroying others, not cool.
Well, I agree, but we run into this First Amendment thing.
That's
And
true.
I'm not
That's true.
not buying into,
Yeah.
Nazism. I'm not buying into I think groups. So a government cannot sanction speech or forbid speech. Hate speech is free speech. Groups, on the other hand, groups, individual groups, private groups, GOP, young Republicans, and truthfully, I say this, but I'll tell you, this is happening on the left too. Things like murder CEOs, murder rich people. That's being socialized on the left, and that's a taboo that's being laundered effectively on the left. And so it's happening both sides. We're focused in on Nazis because it's funnier. Who in the hell ever thought that when we hit a place where, Nazis, they're just funnier.
I think it probably would have to do with who is being oppressed in that viewpoint. When you look at the idea of people who are, all for murdering CEOs, which I'm not. Again, I'll come out and say I'm not for murdering really anybody.
You're a brave man.
I'm anti-Nazi, I'm anti-rape, and I'm anti-murder. So I'm the trifecta of brave. But the concepts of when you start to take so much from somebody that they have nothing left. You saw this in every major revolution, right? The French Revolution was predicated on this principle. I guess it's not surprising when you have this wealth distribution happening the way that it's happening, that people are starting to get to this point where they're starting to question CEOs and people who have billions of dollars and saying, well, wait a minute, why are they so special? I don't think, again, murdering people isn't the way to go, because we live in a society now that you don't have to murder people to make them irrelevant. And I think that's the key, right? Like the point isn't to physically bring down harm to people who have these taboo beliefs or who don't share your principles. It's reinventing what taboo is and how it's implemented and why. Because the idea with things that are taboo was to sort of protect society from these atrocities that happen when those ideas become more than just ideas. Because that's what we saw with Nazism. The point of saying hate speech isn't really the problem. And that wasn't the issue with Nazis. It wasn't that they were espousing hatred and bad speech. It was that they turned that into an attempted genocide. That's where that taboo is, to tamp that down to prevent that from happening. So again, for me, it isn't necessarily about going in and beating up a bunch of Nazis. It's actually about saying expose them for what they are and for what they're trying to do, the direction that they're trying to go. Because if you're saying that, hey, Hitler had some great ideas and he's doing, okay, but what he did was one of the most heinous acts committed against other humans that has ever happened en masse, right? Millions and millions of people were murdered. So I wouldn't say beat up the Nazis. I'd say it's call them out for what they are, and don't excuse what they're saying, because what we don't want is another genocide.
Again, stepping right out there in the realm of, I mean, your bravery has me in awe this evening. David's against genocide now, too, everyone.
I am also against genocide. I mean, well, and I count that like murder
Murder
and genocide, mass murder,
on a grand
all
scale.
kinds of murder, all kinds of
All the
murder,
murder. All the
all the
murder.
murder,
Put it,
all of it,
yeah.
the rape, the murder, the Nazis. I'm against them all. And
I guess going
if
back
you're
to the
pro-Nazi, you're pro rape and murder.
So here's a reason why diversity actually protects us. Diversity does tend to keep groups on the rails in this regard. Homogeneous groups can become dangerous in their ideologies because they do share a background and a perspective. They can speak toward one another as if they are not threatened, and then they can threaten other groups. So diversity actually helps us. There's a lot of reasons why diversity brings new ideas, fuller understanding of the world and of potential problems. And that might be, I mean, part of the problem with these groups is that they were incredibly homogeneous subsections of groups. And it really is. And this is something that the parties used to do for themselves. They used to police themselves. They used to have some internal controls. The government can't do this for us. They just can't without attacking free speech. And we can't tolerate that. We cannot tolerate that. And we have to protect, governmentally at least, we've got to protect hate speech as much as we hate it. But these groups, these private groups that are non governmental, they do have to police themselves. They do have to hold the line and have some integrity and punish those who step out. They do have to hold taboos where they belong and not allow them to be laundered and call bullshit. And we're seeing less of a willingness to call bullshit. And in the case of the one group, JD Vance said, "Oh, it's just a bunch of kids being kids." And as you have pointed out, JD Vance is like 41 years old. And to be a young Republican, you have to be 40 or under. We're not talking kids. We're talking full-fledged adult, for the most part, men who weren't just, engaged in silliness that children engage in. These were men who were on the cusp of becoming the next leaders of the GOP. We're picking on the GOP because this story was directly connected to them. I'll reiterate, I think this taboo laundering is happening on the left as well.
Being able to call out the outliers and not allowing it to become more mainstream is sort of the key to that. It's about not allowing the laundering to occur in the first place. Because you're never going to get rid of fringe ideas. You're never going to get rid of hate speech. And as you pointed out, we don't necessarily want to limit speech in general, but the ability to not allow them to become mainstream by identifying how distasteful it is sort
Yeah.
of the key.
Well, that's the thing, and that's maybe the part that irritates me because from a rhetorical device standpoint, I see how quickly they can flip it around and say, "You're censoring me." This isn't about whether difficult things can be discussed. Difficult things can be discussed, and they should be discussed. What we're really talking about is the costume an idea wears. And what they're doing is they're putting a costume on an idea that they know can't survive naked. They're putting a costume on it which allows it to get enough air to shift the window of conversation. And that's what we're talking about. It's not that these concepts should never be talked about. They should. There's nothing inherently wrong about talking about difficult things. It's that they're taking them, dressing them up because they know the idea in and of itself cannot survive.
Well, I think we should just make shirts that say I'm anti-Nazi, anti-rape, and anti-murder, and start
Just,
handing them
I'm
out. And if
putting my foot down, folks.
anybody who looks at those shirts and doesn't like them, well, just don't vote for them. Don't put them in public office because you probably don't want that person making decisions for you.
Well, and we are talking more about like healthy discussion. I'm all for it. Let's make the t-shirts. I'll wear it every day. Adults can discuss forbidden things. They do it with ownership. They do it with humility. They do it with context. Children hide behind jokes. And anyone who's has kids or been around kids, you know this. They hide behind jokes and then they sue for moral injury when someone hears them. And that can't be allowed. So that's where I'm putting my foot down. Nope. Not gonna allow it.
Well, there you go. Robbie is for free speech, but not a fan of the Nazis.
Not a fan.
Something that occurred to me that is not necessarily on this along this line of thinking. This last week, I've noticed something with the war in Iran. We're told about this ceasefire, and seemingly every day and then seemingly every day, there's fighting between the two sides, caveated by, but the ceasefire is holding. And it occurred to me, Robbie, every time I hear that, I think about The Princess Bride and Inigo Montoya saying, I don't think this word means what you think it means. Because
Inconceivable.
every time they talk about this ceasefire, I'm thinking, I don't think they know what ceasefire means.
Well, every time they say the war is over and then talk about a ceasefire, I don't think they know
Yeah.
what that word means because, by definition, a lack of hostility is called peace. A ceasefire is a period in which two people at war are not shooting at each other,
Except for fucking shooting at each other. So,
except for the fact that we are shooting at each other. Yeah.
and I wondered, okay, so why do they keep using this terminology to describe the wrong thing? And what I started harking back to is just how many times Donald Trump has said words and then sort of opined about their meaning, and it just wasn't the right meaning. And I realized, like grocery, he's talked about grocery. He said groceries. It's an old word. Nobody ever says it
You can
except
never hear groceries anymore.
fucking everybody
For
every day.
everybody going to the goddamn grocery store every day, like I do.
Occurred to me is that I think he actually speaks a different version of English than everybody else. And so you have proper British English, right? You have like the lifts and Tories and shit like that, right? And then you have American English that you and I are used to. And so, like, ceasefire means that you are ceasing to fire, right? Like,
Built right
that
in.
yeah, I mean, it's easy. One of the easier parts of the English language. And then I think there is Donald Trump English, where the word means whatever the fuck you need it to mean in that moment. But again, I always have to wonder is like, why? Why does he speak like that?
Well, it's reminiscent to me of, and I think our tens of listeners can identify with this. Remember a time you were having an argument with your significant other, and anytime when you're having an argument with a significant other, you get down to semantics, you've lost the fucking script. I mean, it's over. But it's like you said, well, I did say, but I meant, and it's like hinging around a singular word, and it's silly.
I wish I could say it was semantics. I just don't know that he actually knows the meaning of certain words. Like he just doesn't like he knows the word, but he doesn't have a concept of what it means. And so like the word ceasefire, it doesn't mean to him what it means to you and I. And I think that's because nobody ever calls him out on it like his entire life. Not just in the last 10 years, but I think probably his entire life he's sort of probably just said words like kids do with no concept of what it actually means. And nobody's been like, that's not what that means. Do you know what that means? And they've just never done that because they do that. You would do that to your child when they use a word like, do you know what that word means? For example, when my son was eating off of his plate and I said, what are you doing, buddy? And he goes, I'm eating doggy style. We just about fucking died. And so, of course, his brother also decided that he wanted to try doggy style. So,
David, I can't in good conscience make any jokes about this involving your children.
but no, but that's what I'm saying. So we're sitting there trying not to, just die because you can't explain to your children that. But what occurred to me is that at some point, my sons are going to figure out that that's not what that means. It won't be from me. They're going to figure that out and they're going to be quite embarrassed. But I don't think Donald Trump ever figured out most words, like most words in English, because he did. I think he attended college. I just don't think he went to college. Like, I don't know that he learned in college. And so I question, I think maybe Robbie and I don't know, I could be wrong, but I just don't know that he knows what words mean. I think they just mean whatever to him. So somebody said the word ceasefire, he's just going with it. He doesn't know what the fuck it means. He doesn't care. Cause again, he's just an old fucking man. And why is he going to change now? It would be annoying. Could you imagine trying to correct him? How fucking irritating would that be? If you're like, dude, that's not what that means. You just give up, wouldn't you? You'd be like, all right, never mind. Fuck, just yeah, let it. Okay, you're right, Donald. Eat off your plate. Eat doggy style. We're not going to question that. Go ahead, have at it, doggy style.
And for those who are mandatory reporters in our audience, yeah, I'm sure you could probably figure out how to report on David.
Anyway, that was that's terrible. Anyway,
Oh, that was a
okay.
good one. That was a good one. That's one that you will probably include in your dad toast at your child's wedding.
Mm-hmm. When my children happily announced they were doing it doggy style at the dinner table. Okay, well, You got any prescriptions this week?
I've got one, and this is in keeping with you got to police your own people. So, political movements must wash their own damn laundry before accusing everyone else of smelling weird. Every tribe has a hamper. The question is not whether your side has dirty clothes. The question is whether you build a theology around Febreze. Just they have to police themselves. They really do. They have to set their standards and they have to hold their members to their standards, and they can't immediately when their members are not living up to whatever standards ostensibly they might believe in, they can't immediately go but they do. That's just spraying Febreze on it, man. Wash your goddamn clothes.
And I think if in the absence of the party doing its own laundry in that way, I think the people still have the ability to say no. And so when this stuff comes out, I'd say don't ignore it, right? Just pay attention and say, I'm not going to vote for that person no matter what. I don't care who's backing that person. I see you. I see what you're doing. This is where I think democracy needs to start getting back in the hands of the people, just like I said last week. People need to start using their votes. Lately, the way that gerrymandering has started the redistricting in all these places to try to ensure that the Republican Party stays in power, that's only if people still continue to vote Republican. And the thing is, I'd say don't vote just Republican, vote for the candidates that you believe espouse the same principles that you do. That's sort of the key. And I'm not saying go vote Democrat. I'm saying vote for the people and everyone. Vote for the people that have the ethics, the morals, and the principles that you want representing you in your government. So my prescription, Robbie, is that everybody needs to go out and get a shirt that says, I'm anti Nazi, anti rape, and anti murder. I think if everybody started wearing shirts like that, we'd let those people who are not those things know where we stand. And at the very least, they'd have to start defending one of those positions if they don't agree. And I'd love to see it. I'd love to see that. Let them call themselves out.
You're starting a movement.
I'm going to start a movement
Every movement has to start somewhere.
starting now. I'm starting that movement now. Make the damn shirts. Okay. We'll put them on our website. All right, Robbie, you got anything else?
I don't. I'm still just struck by what's considered controversial now. But no, I think yet again, we put a bullet in it.
All right, let's do that. All right, everybody, go ahead, hit like, subscribe to our podcast, share us, please. Let's get some more listeners. We need to get pushed up on that algorithm because at the very least, I mean, people are listening to their crap. They might as well listen to our crap. Thank you so much. We appreciate you for listening. And that's it. So let's cue up that music and we are out.